We're gonna be doing how to survive a zombie apocalypse. It's a react. I'm doing this on my phone. I am sorry. I have strep throat and an ear infection, so bear with me and let's watch. And I'm gonna be reacting to this. Thank you to How Not to Die for showing me this video. Go check out his channel. I'm guessing that this is gonna be very good. But this is every way to survive the first 90 days of a zombie outbreak. So if you guys have a disagreement, please comment. And
congratulations, you have 2 potato babies. But unfortunately, in today's video, I'll be explaining every way to survive the first 90 days of a zombie outbreak. Not through brute force or action movie heroics, but through the quiet decisions that actually keep you alive. Understanding the collapse. The first rule of survival is understanding that the collapse comes before the chaos. Those early days aren't about fighting the undead. They're about recognizing when normal life has stopped working, even if it still looks familiar on the surface. In the beginning, the biggest danger isn't the infected, it's confusion. Information is incomplete, advice contradicts itself.
I agree with that because, oh my god, I really gotta get a YouTube Premium again. I agree with that. If you're confused, then you're probably gonna die. Like, you just gotta understand it, otherwise, yeah.
And people keep following routines that only make sense in a functioning society. This is where most people get caught off guard. They wait too long to adjust, trusting systems that are already breaking down. Crowded areas become unpredictable, homes suddenly stop feeling safe, and decisions made out of comfort instead of awareness start stacking up. The people who survive this stage aren't reckless or fearless. They pay attention, notice when patterns change, and adapt early, setting the foundation for everything that comes next. Once you realize the collapse comes before the chaos, everything else starts making more sense. The real question then becomes what you do in those first few days, when things still look normal, but absolutely aren't. If you've ever ignored a check engine light because the car was still driving, congratulations. You understand this phase perfectly. The first 72 hours. The first 72 hours after a zombie outbreak are where most people unknowingly decide how their story ends. Not because they face zombies head-on, but because they keep behaving like the rules of normal life still apply. This phase is especially dangerous because everything looks familiar enough to feel safe, even though it very clearly isn't. At this point, cars are still moving. Phones are still working and official statements are still being made. Some stores might even open briefly, which gives people a false sense of control. They assume that if infrastructure exists, then order exists too. In reality, these systems are already under extreme stress. They just haven't failed loudly yet. Most people react the same way here. They feel an overwhelming need to do something, anything, just to regain a sense of control. That usually means leaving safe spaces to rush grocery stores, gas stations, or pharmacies alongside hundreds of other panicked people. Crowds form fast, tensions spike, and decisions get...
Yo, wait, I just got proven wrong. I was gonna make a video about how I want to survive, and one of the things that I said was a grocery store to go to, because I live in a small town, but I just realized like 50,000 people are gonna be there, and the supply is gonna run out in like a day. Probably not a day, like a couple weeks. And like if one person dies, like an old grandma, we're fucked.
Worse by the minute. If you've ever seen people lose their minds over a minor shortage, imagine that energy multiplied by fear and uncertainty. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, people can go insane without their devices. And I am not saying that that's not me. Like, I can control it a little bit more. But to be honest, like, a lot of people grown up being on their iPads, phones, etc. that it's the only thing that they can keep busy. And especially in a zombie outbreak, you can't do fun things, because doing fun things can kill you. Trying to get playing with toys can kill you.
Plan. Truly no way that turns into chaos immediately. The smarter option during these early days is often staying exactly where you are, assuming your location meets basic safety requirements. Limited entry point.
Now, I know we wouldn't know about zombie shows about this, but in the Walking Dead city, they nuked, wait, what was the city called? Somebody in the comments, if you would like to, tell me what the city is called. You do not have to. And I would appreciate if you go subscribe to this guy and maybe subscribe to me if you want more like the video. But let's get back to it.
Matter. Strong barriers matter. Being unnoticed matters even more. Right now, visibility is a liability, not an advantage. Apartments are especially risky during this stage because shared spaces force interaction. All it takes is one scared or aggressive person to turn an entire building into a problem. Detached homes and quieter areas reduce risks.
Oh yeah, and also in outbreaks, like I don't know what he's this outbreak about, but like with those like I only watched really The Walking Dead, but like The Last of Us zombies and like those like ones that freaking like World War Z, I think. No, 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 dude, I'm just saying goodbye. Like just take me, because those things are terrifying. Or like the creakers that, and then I'm just like, and I just disappear. Like, heck no.
By limiting variables, not because they're perfect, but because fewer unknowns are involved. The people who survive this phase aren't reckless or heroic. They're observant. They notice when emergency response times slow down, when official messaging becomes vague, and when temporary measures start lasting longer than promised. Those subtle shifts signal that systems are breaking, even if no one says it out loud yet. You might think that was bad, but you're wrong. If you think acting fast is the key to surviving early on, the next part is going to completely mess with that idea. Supplies for survival. When people imagine survival supplies, they usually picture extremes. Weapons, generators, massive food stockpiles, anything that makes them feel powerful and prepared. The problem is that feeling prepared and being prepared are very different things. In the early days, food scarcity is mostly psychological. People aren't starving
these
yet, they're afraid of
mofos.
starving later.
Look,
Water, on
those
the other
things
hand,
can
becomes
like
a real issue
climb
almost immediately.
walls.
Dehydration affects your focus, your mood, and your ability to think clearly faster than hunger ever will. And people rarely recognize that's what's happening. Reliable access to clean water should always come first. Stored water, filtrate.
My fat ass would be running like so slow. I'm sorry, I used to be so fast. And I've lost it all. Like, I'm not fat. It's just like I cannot run fast. Oh, and I have like asthma. So like people with asthma, no bueno. Yeah, we're cooked. We're cooked, guys.
Or knowing exactly where safe refills are located matters far more than hoarding food you may not even want to eat under stress.
I love that everyone gets to pick a flavor they love.
After water, calories matter, but they should be simple, familiar, and easy to consume. This is not the moment to experiment with elaborate survival meals or convince yourself you'll suddenly enjoy eating whatever questionable thing you found online. Stress kills appetite quickly, and when people stop eating properly, their judgment suffers. That's why boring food works best. It keeps your body functional without demanding attention. Is there another area people underestimate? Without access to healthcare, minor injuries escalate fast. Small cuts get infected. Pain.
Oh yeah, I just thought of a better idea. Go to a freaking hospital. And then go back to the back. They have that stuff. Stop. Like, go.
Lingers longer. Fevers become serious problems. And none of that is solved by having a weapon if you're too injured to move
Yeah. Or it's like, I feel like that would be the scariest thing, getting bit. Because, like, people get, like, these days, like, people get their arms, legs amputated. Or like a toe and amputated, and that's fine. But like get with no antibiotics usually, and like that would be the most painful thing ever.
Weapons have their place, but early survival is far more about avoiding conflict than winning it. The goal is reducing exposure and risk.
Or it's like we don't know that walkers go off to sound. Cooks.
Not proving you're dangerous. And yeah, carrying 10 weapons while ignoring basic first aid is definitely a bold strategy. Everyone plans for fighting zombies. Almost no one plans for getting hurt and having no help. Nothing says prepared, like bleeding out next to a duffel bag full of gear you never learned how to use. How not to be targeted. Movement during the early weeks should always have a reason. Wandering around just to see what's going on is one of the fastest ways to end up somewhere you can't escape from. Zombies aren't the only ones watching movement either. Other survivors are paying attention, even if you don't notice them. Loud movement attracts attention, but predictable movement is...
Wait, what was that movie where they all went into panic? it was like there was like these like dinosaurs that went back to life, and they started like if you make I think it's like silent or something, and then they started like taking each other's cars, because in every zombie movie show I've seen, Cookie, come here. Sorry, it's my dog. Like the zombies are a bad threat, right? But humans are more of a threat. I feel like, because unless if it's like them freaking crickers, creakers. I just said, okay, those things, like, but anyways, I'm thinking of Walking Dead when I'm seeing this video. Those things are terrifying. But humans, like, in The Walking Dead, Negan, and the governor, and let me think of another one. That chick from the Commonwealth, Pulma, the CRM, a little bit. The that the freaking chick from Dead City, the one that the girl, I think she's in danger. I don't know. Anyways, a lot of people are bad, and like, you know, like, yeah.
Just as dangerous. Leaving at the same time every day or following the same routes turns you into part of the environment, and predictable patterns are easy to exploit. Once people start recognizing when and where you move, they also start guessing what you might have. Traveling during lower activity hours, time every day or following the same routes turns you into part of the environment, and predictable patterns are easy to exploit. Once people start recognizing when and where you move,
oh, that's like.
They also start guessing what you might have.
Bat.
Traveling during lower activity hours reduces unnecessary contact. Early mornings and late afternoons tend to be safer than peak daylight chaos. Night movement sounds smart in theory, but humans are terrible at navigating unfamiliar environments in the dark. Injuries happen more easily, and a single fall can end everything very quickly. Stick to the edges of spaces instead of moving through wide open areas. Avoid routes with limited exits. Dead ends don't give second chances. And when an area feels unusually quiet, assume there's a reason for that and move cautiously. Every horror movie starts with someone saying, "I'll just check something real quick," where plans fail. Zombies are dangerous, but they're predictable. People are neither. Early in an outbreak, there's a strong push toward forming groups. And on the surface, that sounds logical. Cooperation feels safer than isolation. The problem is scale. Large groups collapse quickly. Resources turn into arguments. Leadership becomes contested. Small disagreements escalate because stress amplifies everything. People start protecting.
Somebody who's never ever seen or like thinks dumb, why don't you just be with like Rick Grimes? Why don't you just be like with Daryl? They have plot armor. Yeah, why don't you just be with like every surviving character? Like they're real. Yeah.
Their status instead of prioritizing survival. And that shift causes more damage than any external threat. Smaller groups tend to function better. 2 to 5 people allows responsibilities to be shared without creating power struggles. Trust should be built slowly and based on behavior, not promises. Someone being friendly doesn't mean they'll act rationally when resources get...
Yeah, because like... Yeah. Oh, and I forgot, the wolves?
Scarce or plans fail. Eventually, cooperation becomes necessary for long-term survival, but timing matters. Grouping up too early often introduces more risk than protection, especially when people barely know each other. And yeah, betting your life on a stranger who seems chill has historically worked out great for humans. Most people imagine zombie survival as a physical challenge. In reality, managing human behavior under pressure is the hardest part. If vibes were a survival skill, we'd still be extinct.
I'm sorry for I keep on pausing.
Weeks A to 4. By weeks 2 to 4, most survivors fall into a dangerous mental trap. They start thinking they've figured things out. The panic fades slightly, routines form, and people convince themselves that the worst is over. That feeling of stability is comforting, but it's also fake, and fake
Oh.
stability gets people killed. At this stage,
Do I need to
zombies
board that?
haven't disappeared. Resources haven't magically replenished themselves. The only thing that's changed is perception. People stop double-checking entrances. They get lazy about noise. They assume tomorrow will look like today, even though there's no reason to believe that's true anymore. Routine is useful for mental health, but it's dangerous when it becomes predictable. Predictability turns survival into a schedule, and schedules are easy to observe. Anyone watching learns when you leave, how often you return.
So another thing is, like, if you're gonna join a community, act all small. Like Carol going to Alexandria. Wait, what's it? Actually, no. What was it called? Yeah? Yeah, Alexandria. Anyways, like, Carol was, like, holding the pew-pew, like, and, like, made it look that she was weak and couldn't hold one. Because so then they're like, oh, it's so weak, blah, blah.
And roughly what you're doing outside. That information has value, and not
So they
everyone
don't,
who
like,
notices
always,
you
like,
has good intentions. If you're staying in one location during this phase,
like,
redundancy
always,
becomes
like,
critical.
stare at
One
her
exit
and is
isn't enough.
suspicious of
One
her.
water source isn't enough. One plan isn't enough. Anything that relies on a single point of failure will eventually fail. That's not pessimism. That's just reality doing what it always does. Scavenging also changes here, and this is where a lot of people miscalculate
creepers.
risk. Early
Yeah,
on,
look at
going out feels
those.
productive. You come back with stuff, and that reinforces the behavior. Later, runs get longer, noisier,
Yeah,
and less rewarding.
look at those. Hell no. Hell no. You think I'm just gonna be like, okay. Hell no. No, thank you. No. Those things run. Walkers are like, those things are like,
Are stripped, streets are watched.
they're like, like walkers on steroids, but they like took 50 steroids.
Each
Pills.
trip gives diminishing returns. The worst part is when people keep scavenging out of habit, not necessity, even when the risk clearly outweighs the benefit. And yeah, that plan where someone insists on one more run just to be safe, that always works out beautifully for them. If you think settling into a routine means you're safer, this next part is where that logic completely falls apart. Psychological wear and tear. Physical survival gets all the attention, but mental survival is where most people start slipping without realizing it. Constant stress isn't dramatic, it's slow and exhausting. It affects sleep, focus, and emotional regulation in ways people don't notice until damage is already done. Living in a constant state of alertness rewires how your brain works. You become irritable. You make snap judgments. You misread neutral situations as threats. And when everyone around you is feeling the same way, small misunderstandings spiral fast.
Because
sleep deprivation
I don't
alone
want
can
my
destroy
video to
good
get
judgment, add
age-restricted.
fear, isolation, and uncertainty. And suddenly, people are making decisions they'd never consider under normal circumstances. That's when unnecessary risks start feeling reasonable. Structure becomes essential during this phase, even if it's basic. Wake up at the same time. Divide tasks. Rotate responsibilities. Not because it increases efficiency, but because it gives your brain something
That
stable
would
to
so
hold
be
on to.
me.
Without structure, days blur together.
The end
Motivation
is
drops and
near.
mental fatigue accelerates. Boredom is another underrated threat. When days feel empty, curiosity kicks in, and curiosity pushes people to explore places they shouldn't. That's usually followed by someone saying, it'll only take a minute. And yeah, famous last words. The real damage happens when people stop caring enough to be cautious. Indifference kills faster than fear. And honestly, watching people self-sabotage because they were just bored is painful, but also incredibly predictable. Humans really hate being alone with their thoughts. If you think mental strain is manageable without consequence, the next phase proves just how wrong that assumption is. Adaptation or elimination. Anyone still alive by weeks 5 to 8 has either adapted or is barely hanging on. This is where survival shifts from reacting to problems toward managing long-term exposure. Mistakes don't disappear, but tolerance for repeated mistakes does. Mobility starts mattering more again. Staying in one place too long increases the odds of being noticed, especially if you've been active in the area. Movement during this phase is less frequent, but more intentional. Every trip has a goal, and if that goal doesn't justify the risk, the trip doesn't happen. Gear choices get more practical here. Loud clothing, unnecessary weight, or items carried just in case start working against you. Every item earns its spot based on usefulness, not comfort.
Good
Quiet
job,
movement,
Grandma.
freedom of motion, and endurance matter more than protection that restricts you. This is also the point where people finally realize exhaustion ruins everything. Plans fall apart when you're tired. Injuries happen when you're careless. And
The
careless behavior
Starbucks girl.
compounds over time. You can't outthink or outfight fatigue. It always wins eventually.
double
Group
chin.
dynamics shift too. People either learn to communicate clearly, or tension builds until someone leaves or gets pushed out. Conflict resolution becomes survival critical, not optional. A group that can't manage disagreement doesn't last. And yes, this is usually when someone suggests expanding, recruiting more people, or building something bigger. Ambition creeps in once immediate fear fades, even when conditions clearly don't support growth. Fantastic idea. Absolutely flawless. No downsides whatsoever. If you think making it this far means you're finally safe, the 90-day mark is where most survivors still mess it up. The first 90 days. Reaching 3 months feels like a victory, and in a way, it is. Most people don't make it this far, but statistically, this is where many remaining survivors collapse. Not because they're weak, but because they overestimate what survival actually requires.
That's from
The biggest
that
threat at
movie
this
with
point isn't zombies,
possessed
it's other
girl.
groups. Scarcity hasn't gone away, information is still limited, and now there's competition. People notice patterns, they notice who's stable. Stability becomes valuable, and valuable things attract attention. Some survivors make the mistake of advertising their success. They stockpile visibly, they secure large areas. They try to establish dominance. That might work short term, but it also paints a target. The smartest survivors stay boring. They stay quiet. They avoid becoming an asset worth taking. The worst failures happen when survivors try to recreate society before conditions allow it. Old rules don't work in a broken system, and forcing them just creates conflict. By this stage, survival is no longer about reacting to danger. It's about avoiding it entirely. People who last don't look impressive. They look unremarkable, and that's the point. Playing it safe. By the time someone reaches the 3-month mark, survival has stopped feeling urgent and started feeling tedious. That's a strange shift, but it's exactly what happens. Fear fades into background noise, and routine takes over. This is where people stop thinking like survivors and start thinking like planners. Planning isn't bad, but it becomes dangerous when it's based on optimism instead of reality. At this point, many survivors convince themselves they've stabilized enough to think bigger. They want more space, more people, and more resources. They mistake endurance for security. This is the phase where overconfidence sets in. People who've avoided major problems start believing they're immune to them. They cut corners. They push boundaries. They assume that because something hasn't gone wrong yet, it won't. That assumption has ended more survival stories than zombies ever did. The real issue isn't confidence itself, it's when confidence replaces caution. Successful long-term survival still depends on the same boring principles that worked early on. Avoid attention, limit exposure, stay adaptable. Nothing about the world suddenly becomes safe just because you've lasted longer than average. And yeah, deciding you're established because nothing terrible happened last week is an impressively optimistic way to misread reality. If you think stability means you can finally relax, this next section explains why relaxing is exactly what gets people killed. Groups fall apart. If someone has made it this far, chances are they're not alone anymore. Groups tend to form naturally over time, whether out of necessity or familiarity. And while cooperation increases survival odds in theory, it also introduces new problems that people rarely plan for. After 90 days, stress hasn't disappeared. It's just changed shape. Instead of panic, there's frustration. Instead of fear, there's resentment. People get tired of each other. Small habits become irritating. Minor disagreements feel personal. This is where leadership becomes a real issue. Early on, leadership is practical. Who can do what? Who has what skill? Later, leadership turns into authority, and authority turns into control. Some people push for rules. Others push back. Conflict grows quietly before it becomes obvious. Resource distribution causes even more tension. When scarcity is constant, fairness becomes subjective. Someone always feels like they're contributing more than they're getting back. And once that feeling sets in, cooperation erodes fast. Most groups don't break because of external threats. They break because no one learned how to communicate under pressure. And yeah, passive-aggressive survival politics was definitely not what anyone signed up for, but here we are. If you think the zombies are still the biggest problem by now, the next part flips that idea completely. Competition over chaos. By the time society has been gone for months, chaos stabilizes into something worse, competition. Survivors are no longer reacting to collapse. They're reacting to each other. Information spreads, territories form, patterns become visible. People notice who's stable, who has food, who seems organized. Stability becomes a resource in itself, and resources attract attention. This is why the smartest survivors avoid looking successful. Groups that advertise their security draw interest, and not all of that interest is friendly. Attempts to dominate areas or collect people under one banner almost always lead to conflict. Power struggles don't disappear just because civilization does. Staying boring becomes a survival strategy. Limited visibility, minimal interaction, no unnecessary expansion. The goal isn't control, it's continuity. The people who last don't win conflicts, they avoid them entirely. And yes, pretending you're running a post-apocalyptic startup is a wild choice, but confidence is a hell of a drug. If you think survival is about rebuilding the old world, this final principle explains why that mindset fails. Getting noticed. In the early stages of an outbreak, most people obsess over weapons and defenses, but completely ignore the things that actually get them spotted. Noise, light, and visibility don't just attract zombies, they attract people. And people who notice you are almost always worse than the undead. Noise is the fastest way to announce your location without realizing it. Gunshots, engines, breaking glass, raised voices, even repetitive mechanical sounds stand out in an otherwise quiet environment. What's dangerous isn't just loud noise, it's consistent noise. Patterns form. Anyone listening learns where you are, how often you move, and roughly what you're doing. People underestimate how far sound carries when cities go quiet. Without traffic, construction, and background hum, even small noises travel.
Oops.
A generator running at night doesn't just provide power. It broadcasts your presence to anyone within range who understands what that sound means. Light works the same way. At night, light doesn't just illuminate your surroundings, it exposes you. A single window glowing in an otherwise dark area acts like a beacon. Firelight flickers. Flashlights cut through darkness in straight lines. Screens reflect on faces. Every source of light creates contrast, and contrast draws attention. The mistake people make is thinking light is harmless if they can't see anyone watching them. But visibility isn't mutual. You don't need to see someone for them to see you. Darkness protects observers, not occupants. During the day, visibility changes, but the danger remains. Movement in open spaces draws the eye instinctively. Humans are wired to notice motion. Crossing streets, walking along skylines, or standing upright against clear backgrounds makes you visible
those
from much farther
mofos.
away
Look
than you'd
those
expect. This is why survivors who last longer move differently. They stick to shadows. They break silhouettes. They pause instead of walking continuously. They avoid creating recognizable shapes that stand out against the environment. Visibility is reduced not through speed, but through blending. The people who ignore this tend to assume danger only exists when contact happens. They don't consider how often they're being observed beforehand. By the time someone realizes they've been noticed, the situation is usually already tilted against them. And yeah, somehow people still believe that using a flashlight at night while standing in front of a window is stealthy behavior, truly a bold interpretation of physics. If you think staying armed is what keeps you safe, understanding how attention works is where that belief starts falling apart. Surviving illnesses. Most zombie scenarios focus on violence, but statistically, illness is far more dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't chase you. It just waits while you slowly make worse decisions. In a collapsed system, minor health issues stop being minor. A small cut doesn't heal cleanly without proper care. A mild fever can linger long enough to drain energy. Foodborne illness becomes a serious threat when hydration is limited. And dental pain, something people rarely think about, can become debilitating without treatment. The problem is that
Yeah, what? Like, in The Walking Dead, it shows nothing about teeth. Like, Cookie, come here. Cookie. Like, you're eating a bunch of food without... I've never ever seen anybody... And where do they go to the bathroom? Like, I want to know this. Wait, in there? But, like, they don't brush their teeth. It doesn't show when or how.
sickness feels manageable right up until it isn't. People push through symptoms because survival demands productivity. Rest feels like a luxury. Ignoring pain feels necessary. And by the time someone accepts they're seriously unwell, options are already limited. Infections spread faster when hygiene collapses. Clean water becomes harder to access. Soaps, antiseptics, and basic sanitation supplies disappear quickly. Even good habits slip under stress. Hands don't get washed often enough. Wounds don't get cleaned properly. Illness doesn't require dramatic failure, just consistent neglect. Medication shortages make everything worse. Chronic conditions become unpredictable. Pain management becomes guesswork. Fevers stay fevers. Coughs linger. And without antibiotics, infections follow their natural course, not a convenient one. What makes illness especially dangerous is how it affects judgment. Dehydration causes confusion. Fever reduces coordination. Pain shortens patience. You don't just feel worse. Decisions take longer. Reactions slow. Situational awareness drops. And survival mistakes stack fast when cognition is impaired. Groups often underestimate this risk as well. Sick members reduce overall mobility. Tasks get redistributed unevenly. Frustration grows. Some people hide symptoms to avoid being seen as a liability, which only makes things worse later. Preparing for illness isn't dramatic, but it matters. Cleanliness, water purification, rest schedules, and basic medical knowledge carry more long-term value than most gear people prioritize. And yes, it's both ironic and tragic that someone could survive hordes of zombies just to be taken out by an untreated tooth infection. Evolution really has a sense of humor. If you think staying healthy is just about avoiding injury, the next topic shows why the environment itself is just as dangerous. Weather and time. The environment doesn't pause for collapse. Weather keeps moving. Seasons still change. change. Time keeps advancing regardless of how prepared anyone feels. Early survival plans often assume stable conditions. Mild temperatures, clear visibility, manageable movement. That illusion doesn't last long. Rain floods routes. Heat exhaustion drains energy. Cold limits dexterity and endurance. And none of it asks permission. Cold weather is especially dangerous because it disguises exhaustion. People burn more calories staying warm. Sleep gets worse. Fine motor skills degrade. Injuries take longer to heal. And once hypothermia becomes a risk, even simple tasks turn dangerous. Heat brings a different set of problems. Dehydration accelerates. Food spoils faster.
So let me pause it.
Fatigue sets in quicker. People underestimate heat because it doesn't feel dramatic, until it suddenly is. Seasonal shifts also change resources. Food availability changes. Clothing needs change. Movement patterns shift. Routes that were safe weeks ago become impassable. Survivors who only plan for the present get caught off guard when conditions evolve. Time itself becomes an enemy when people fail to account for it. Supplies don't last as long as expected. Wear and tear accumulates. Equipment degrades. Energy reserves drop. The longer someone survives, the more important maintenance becomes, and the less forgiving mistakes are. This is why long-term thinkers constantly reassess instead of committing to static plans. What worked last month might be dangerous now. Flexibility beats preparation every time when conditions refuse to stay predictable. The biggest mistake people make is assuming their strategy exists outside of the environment. It doesn't. Weather shapes survival as much as zombies or people ever could. Yeah, nature has never once adjusted its behavior because a human said, "This should be fine." If you think surviving 90 days means you've mastered the world you're in, the next section reminds you why time always has the final say. Letting go. Here's the part most people don't like hearing. You might think that was bad, but you're wrong. Survival isn't about recreating what existed before. It's about accepting what exists now. People who fail long-term aren't weak or unskilled. They're attached to expectations that no longer make sense. They keep waiting for systems to return, for rules to matter, for life to become recognizable again. That attachment clouds judgment and delays adaptation. In a broken world, delayed adaptation is fatal. The people who survive are the ones who let go early. They stop expecting comfort. They stop assuming fairness. They adjust their behavior, their priorities, and their relationships without nostalgia getting in the way. This doesn't mean becoming cruel or reckless. It means becoming realistic. Survival favors people who can accept discomfort without turning it into desperation. Letting go isn't pessimistic. It's practical. Survival isn't dramatic. It's repetitive. It's cautious. It often looks unimpressive from the outside. The people who last don't look like heroes, and they don't want to. They want to be alive. And after 90 days, that's the only goal that still matters. If you enjoyed this
Okay, everybody, come subscribe
video
to
and want
this
to see
guy.
more, click the video.
I think I'll put him in the link in the description. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to this guy. Have a good day, and if you want to see more content, just tell me. Have a great day. Goodbye, guys.